Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Q&A. Henry is delayed for some reason, but we've made sure that he has the link, so he will join us hopefully in just a minute. My name is Michelle. I also go by Llama Drama Rama on Discord. I've been a nerd fighter since 2011, and it's been so amazing to become a TB fighter in the last couple of years as well. I'm pretty sure everyone knows our guests, so I won't give them a long introduction, but here's John. He is the author of many books and YouTube videos, but most recently, and at least today, most importantly, he published Everything is Tuberculosis, The History and Persistence of Our Deadliest Infections. We used Everything is Tuberculosis to kick off our TBReaders book club, and it sparked a lot of great discussion for us over the past couple of months. So John, thanks so much for being here. We're really excited for this Q&A.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, and I'm so excited that y'all are doing a book club, and I'm really excited for I mean, I'm obviously excited that you read Everything is Tuberculosis, but I'm equally excited for the books that you have coming up.
Yeah, this is the end of this reading period, and then we're doing Phantom Plague next. So I'm
Oh, I
excited
love
about that.
Phantom Plague. It's got great stuff about vampires that I didn't put in Everything is Tuberculosis to make sure that you would get something special.
Like you purposely excluded the vampires so that we could make sure to read them in Phantom Plague.
Kinda. Yeah. Um,
Amazing.
I
That's very
also felt
thoughtful
like
of
they
you.
didn't quite fit in Everything is Tuberculosis. There was already plenty of historical weirdness that I didn't need to add the vampires. But it's a great chapter in Phantom Plague. It's such a good book. And it's so much about just wonderful, wonderful people who really made it possible for bedaquiline to become the drug that it has become.
Yeah. I mean, you've said this a bunch of times, but I also am a doctor and talk to a lot of doctors, and they also tell me that bedaquiline has been huge and like a total game changer for TB treatment.
Oh, that's great. What kind of doctor are you?
I'm a neurologist.
Wow, cool.
Yeah.
I benefited from a neurologist greatly when I had meningitis.
Yeah, I bet. I'm
Without
sorry that
that
you had
neurologist,
meningitis.
I would have been in big trouble.
That's one of the neurology and infectious disease overlaps. There's actually
Yeah.
not people ask me, do you do TB neurology? And like you can get TB in your brain, but no, I'm just a nerd fighter and also a neurologist.
Awesome.
Anyway, you kind of answered the first question that was the most voted question, which is what was your favorite blank is TB that didn't make it into the book?
Well, that's
Do you
one
have a
of
different
them, but
one?
also I cut at the very end this thing about Ringo Starr only becoming a drummer because he um he spent time at a sanatorium when he was recovering from tuberculosis as a young child, and he was so freaking bored. I mean, this is something that I really wanted to emphasize about life in a sanatorium is that it was so excruciatingly boring, like on a level that none of us with phones can even imagine, right? Like boredom is almost like a solved problem in I mean, for better or worse. Like I'm not sure that it's for better, but boredom is almost like a past tense phenomenon compared to what people in sanatoria went through. And like it was excruciating. Like there's a reason we talk about boredom being like be talking about being like painfully bored or excruciatingly bored or whatever, which is that, boredom is this experience of that is physically painful. And people in sanatoria were subjected to that all the time.
As you're saying boredom over and over, I'm thinking about like the etymology. Like, do you think it's from the same thing as like boring into, you
Oh,
know?
it must be. I mean, I'd never thought about that before, but it must be. I'll have to look that up afterwards.
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, okay, that's a good one. And then I wanted to ask Henry this question also, but what is the most encouraging thing that has come out of this book being published?
Well, I've heard from a lot of individuals, and the real work is done person to person, right? Like the real work in human life is done between a doctor and an individual patient, or between a teacher and an individual student, or between a librarian and an individual patron, or whatever, a customer service employee and the individual customer. Like that's where the real change happens, I think. And so hearing from individuals has been very fulfilling and each time the book is read, it's read differently. So sometimes it's read in the context of somebody being a TB survivor. Sometimes it's read in the context of somebody having lost someone to tuberculosis. And it's wonderful to have the book be read in all those contexts, and it's been really fulfilling on that level. In terms of like what's come out of it concretely, toward a better future for tuberculosis. I feel like the future of tuberculosis has only gotten worse since the book came out, so that might be on me. It really has been very frustrating. I was just at the Gates Foundation yesterday, learning about some of the important, exciting innovations that they have coming up, and that other folks are developing. And, it is an inflection point in the history of tuberculosis. This could be a really wonderful moment, but unfortunately, especially with the NIH cuts and the cuts to USAID, it's going to be a really difficult moment. And so, if anything else has come out of it, I guess it's a sense of solidarity and commiseration because it's such a hard moment. I mean, I don't think anybody ever expected to live in a moment like this one. I certainly didn't. I was hugely naive about what the federal government could, how the federal government could change under a new administration. And so, yeah, it's just a really difficult time.
Yeah, I think all
So
of us have found
I
that.
answered your question about encouragement, Michelle, by being very discouraged.
I mean, that's fair. Sometimes you just have to be honest.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I I guess in response to the discouragement part, I think yeah, I mean, I think none of us really expected this to have to be happening with the federal government. I think I had heard you say at some other points, you wish this book could be a little bit less relevant.
Yeah, yeah, I really do. I mean, I've done so much media over the last 2 months, much more than I have for any of my other books, partly because I'm willing to do it. Usually I'm kind of like, let's not do too much. It's kind of stressful for me. But in this case, like I feel strongly about it and about the cause and trying to call attention to the TB crisis and the crisis of diseases of injustice more generally. Um, and so, yeah, I do wish the book were a little less relevant. And on stage a couple days ago, Bill Gates said that he hopes that in 20 years the book is out of print because it's no longer relevant. And I said that I hope that's true as well.
Yeah, 20 years is ambitious, but it's possible. We know it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's ambitious. I think that's the correct response. But, if if we get the kind of investment in TB that we've seen for other diseases that cause the same level of suffering or the same burden of suffering, then it's very possible. It really is a resource problem, and that's why I'm so proud of what the TB fighters are doing, like fighting for resources on every level, like fighting for resources when it comes to government resources, fighting for resources when it comes to asking private companies to lower prices so that more tools can become available. Um, you know, that's really essential to what we are trying to accomplish together.
Yeah, I was going to say this is not my Q&A, but the most encouraging thing about it for me, I think, um, obviously wish we didn't have so much work to do, but I think it's been a very exciting time to be a TB fighter because a lot of organizations are feeling the urgency to come together. And I think Partners in Health and like the ex-USAID workers that have been reaching out to us,
Hmm.
it's been very exciting, at least for me, to be in all of these rooms and talk to all of these people who are experts in these
Yeah,
fields. I mean,
yeah,
I wish we could do it in like a less chaotic and urgent way, but
yeah.
it is
I mean,
exciting to
and
be
maybe
invited
there's
into
an
this work.
encouragement there and like people coming together and like a sense that like we have to be in this together. My wife often says that the smaller the pond, the bigger the rivalries of the fish. So like in the world of like the art world, for instance, which is a very small pond in the scheme of things, but that's the world where Sarah lives. Like, there's huge territorialism and rivalry, and people who think that museums suck, and people who think that galleries suck, and people who think that this sucks or that sucks, and like, that's inevitably the case anytime there's like super limited resources, and uh, we can't afford to do that. We can't afford to have that in our community because we have to be pulling in the same direction, and we have to understand ultimately, like even the companies that we have to pressure to lower their prices, we're grateful for them being in the space. There's a lot of
Yeah,
companies that we can't pressure to lower their prices because they won't invest anything in tuberculosis.
yeah, that makes sense. This actually leads maybe into one of these other questions, which is if you could design a system to better incentivize TB research, what would that look like?
Well, it's really hard, right? Because you have to dismantle extractive capitalism.
Perfect.
And so I don't want to pretend that it's not hard, but I would like to see, I mean, it has to come from governments. It has to. like seeing the US like cancel all NIH contracts related to foreign trial enrollment means that we're like not walking back from that. We're like falling down the staircase of that. And that's catastrophic. Oh, Henry's coming on soon, but he's having some internet problems. So we'll see. But he
Okay,
should be
we'll
on
get there.
soon. Um, but I would design a system where governments incentivize us to solve problems in human health at least partly in accordance with the size of the burden on human health. So, we would spend a lot of money trying to solve tuberculosis and malaria and even more than that. I guess actually that's not accurate. What I would actually do if I could actually design the system, if I were dictator for a day, is I would design a system of inequity, health inequity, are actually prioritized over problems that aren't driving health inequity. So, like in the places where, we see 5 or 10 times as many kids die under the age of 5 as we do in the United States, or 30 times more. What's driving that inequity? And that's what I would spend money on. And so that's why I would spend money on tuberculosis and malaria, and I would spend money on you know, obviously HIV prevention and HIV care so that we can lower the overall burden of HIV for the next generation. Like that's the stuff that I would spend money on is the stuff that's driving inequity.
Yeah, and also just poverty, which is what's behind all of those things. You did a
Yeah,
podcast.
right. Ultimately, when you solve for poverty, you solve for a lot of these things. There was just that great study in Brazil that when you give people direct cash transfers, TB rates go down.
Yeah, I listened to the podcast. Is it with it's Dr. Laurie Santos, right? The happiness podcast.
Yeah.
And at the end, you had a call for Give Directly, which was that organization that just gives just money to people who are in poverty,
Yeah, and I
and
think
lets
a
them
lot of
decide
times
what to
that
do with it.
right. You have to trust people to know people know what they need to do with their money a lot more than someone from the outside does, right? Like I know what the next $100 in my life needs to go toward in a way that nobody else can. And so I think organizations like Give Directly are very effective poverty reducers as far as charity goes. But they, and it's cheap. The the issue is that, or the place where I think, PIH still has a really important role to play is that like you can give a lot of people, you can address poverty and still not have an X-ray machine. I mean, there were no chest X-ray
Yeah,
machines at LaCalle
for
Government
sure.
Hospital for 3 years. And so we need that. Wherever you are, you need a chest X-ray machine if you're in the
Wow,
U.S. or anywhere you are.
which 3 years? Like at the TB hospital, there was no chest X-ray machine.
That's exactly right. At the TB hospital, there was no chest X-ray machine. Even in 2023, they didn't get it until last year.
So when
They
Henry
had
was
a
being treated
machine.
there, there was no chest X-ray machine.
That's right.
Oh wow.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, that's
And
wild.
the reasons for that are very, very complicated, and they involve like past corruption, and like it's not a simple story. It never is, but it's on its face unacceptable to have a TB hospital where they don't have functioning chest X-rays.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's just so I don't know. That's one of the examples that really drives it home for me as someone who tries to provide healthcare in the United States in a relatively well-resourced environment. That's just so wild to me to not have a chest X-ray machine in a hospital that's specifically for tuberculosis.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's crazy. They would get chest X-rays, but they'd have to leave the hospital to get them.
Oh, I see. They would just go somewhere else. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we get them at the drop of a hat. We get them after you place like a central, like we get them to check that we've put devices in the right location, like not even just to diagnose diseases.
Yeah, I mean they cost like 50 cents. There's no reason not
Yeah,
to.
that's crazy. Maybe another question I can ask you before Henry comes on. What does the research process look like for a book like Everything is Tuberculosis? What kind of sources and experts did you primarily rely on? And what was the process like with regards to fact checking?
Well, I hired a fact checker, so named Will, who did an amazing job and did indeed catch many errors. So uh, I thought that it was sort of just to check all my boxes kind of thing, but then Will came in and was like, "Whoa, man." And so that was very helpful. But when I started researching this or what became this book, I didn't know that I was researching a book. I thought that I was researching to understand something. I thought that I was researching to research, which I do all the time in things that I'm interested in. If it's For a while it was cholera, for a while it was the history of AFC Wimbledon, whatever it is. And then you're researching and I was writing because writing is my way of thinking and writing is my way of kind of synthesizing what I've learned in research. I didn't think that I was writing a book. I thought that I was just organizing my thoughts and having thoughts. Um, and so that meant that I was very disorganized at the beginning because I wasn't trying to do anything formal or anything for anyone other than myself. I just had this big document called TB quotes that was like everything that I found interesting, I would just write it down. Um, and then that was kind of a disastrous way to try to write a book. It turns out because having like a 600-page document called TB quotes, it's searchable, which is nice, as better than it would have been in the 19th century, but still not great. Um, and yeah, so we really I really struggled at the beginning when I realized at first I thought, well, maybe I'm writing a crash course video, maybe I'm writing this, maybe I'm writing that, and I did write a crash course video. So I didn't know what I was writing for sure, but once I realized I was writing a book, I had to kind of go back and like formalize the process. And so that meant rereading a lot of stuff. It meant, yeah. And then like there was the question, which I think is a difficult question because it's a personal book on some level, and then in other ways it's an academic book. And so I tried to like have like inline citations where I would reference whatever I was referencing rather than having a notes section. But that's something I struggled with and like still struggle with, and like sometimes readers get mad at me about that. But like I don't know. The books like my book that I read, like Mountains Beyond Mountains, for instance, didn't have that. And so I was like, well, I guess I won't have it. So it's something that I struggled with, though.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's see, I had a couple follow-up. I guess one of the questions I had was um, if this is something that you've done before, like about cholera or AFC Wimbledon, why did you not write a book about cholera or AFC Wimbledon and you chose to write one about TB?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting question. I don't have a great answer for it, except that like it didn't go away, and maybe someday I will write a book about cholera or AFC Wimbledon. I mean, I'm fascinated by cholera. I think cholera, like tuberculosis, is the ultimate disease of injustice in the sense that it's the biggest infectious killer. Cholera is the ultimate disease of injustice in the sense that it simply does not affect rich people. Rich people can get tuberculosis. Anybody who breathes air can get tuberculosis. They probably won't die of it, but they can get it. Like rich people don't get cholera. Um, and so it's the ultimate disease of like pure, it's caused purely by inequity. And it kills 100,000 people a year. I mean, measles kills 100,000 people a year. The extent, almost all of them kids, the extent to which these diseases of injustice cause tragedies over and over and over again, I think is something that we don't grapple with very much in the global north. But
We're about to grapple with measles.
yeah, I mean, we've already seen two kids die of measles, and that's out of and that's with the best possible care in the world, and that's out of only a couple thousand cases. So, like, if we end up with 10,000 cases or 100,000 cases, or, I mean, every unvaccinated kid is likely to get measles in the next 5 years. I'm afraid in the United States, and so, um, it's, you know, we actually do a better job. RFK Jr. aside, we do a better job of vaccinating for measles than most countries because we have this army of pediatricians who do an incredible job talking to their patients, despite all the misinformation, despite everything. Traditionally, we've done a good job, but we're doing less of a good job now that people in power are saying don't get the MMR vaccine. So that's heartbreaking and like frustrating. And so I could write a book about measles. I just read a good book about measles, so I don't feel like I need to. But yeah, I guess the answer is that I never stopped being interested in TB and I never stopped being pissed off about it. And then when it became kind of it was both a tug and a pull and a push, Michelle, because like on some level I was pulling TB fighters into this fight, but on another level, like y'all were pulling me into working more on it and being more focused on it and caring more about it and wanting to do more. And so And I still feel that. I still feel like y'all are pulling me. Like, I'm afraid we might have some really, I mean, we've had a lot of bad news in the last 12 weeks, so I don't want to say like we're going to have some worse news, but I'm afraid we might have some worse news in the next few weeks when it comes to TB care and diagnostics and stuff. And, you know, I really struggle with it because like you're going to have to lead me as much as I lead you because we have to figure out our priorities together, if that makes sense. We have to figure out how to do it together because there's so many things to focus on right now, whether that's the global fund. I mean, a world without the global fund terrifies me, and I think we could live in a world without the global fund. And when you travel in poor countries, everything is done by the global fund. I mean, in the poorest countries, it's USAID and the global fund, and um, that scares the crap out of me. And so, do we have to? Are we gonna have to fight for the global fund? Does it make sense to fight for the global fund? I mean, I have to count on y'all to lead me. We in TV fighters, you talk about leading by following, which I think is super important and something that I try to do as well. Um, but I think in leading by following, sometimes you're also leading, you know. So yeah, we're gonna have to figure out a lot of stuff together over the coming months and um, really figure out like try to be targeted and smart in how we confront the challenges that we face together. I'm very impressed by what TB fighters have accomplished in terms of those Dear Colleagues letters. I think that's really exciting and really good. And it's the most signers on we've ever had to the Dear Colleague letter for tuberculosis. For the Global Fund, we almost got to where we needed to be, where the most ever, which is incredible in this political environment. And so, I I I remain optimistic that we can accomplish stuff together. Um, it's just the headwinds are so scary.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as someone who I think you're so in this world now that you think about the really big picture. And I have not tried to question whether we should fight for the global fund. PIH told that we have a couple people from PIH who are in our Discord, and they said we should try to get as many signers as possible for this one letter. So we said, okay, we'll do that.
Yeah, well, and
So
I
I
think
like
that's a
that
real
kind of very small focus.
yeah, no, PIH knows what we should be fighting for better than I do. But I have had to have private conversations with PIH and with other folks at, MSF and TAG and other places, other folks that we work with, um, about trying to figure out what's the most impactful way to spend our attention. What's the most impactful way to, and I think, look, at some point, one of two things happens. Either like Congress ceases to be an important part of American governance, which is not just a problem for tuberculosis, right? Like, I mean that's a real that's a catastrophe on a scale that we've never seen in American history. Or Congress reclaims the power of the purse, at which point our funding requests, you know, it becomes a place where we can make a much bigger difference than we can in anything else, right? Because the difference between a $910 million for tuberculosis, $910 million for tuberculosis funding and $940 million for tuberculosis funding, which sounds like the same number to me, but the difference between that is all the money we raise for the Maternal Center of Excellence, right? So like if we can work together to like increase that by like 1% or 2%, um, that's massive. It's a massive, massive difference.
Yeah, that that's helpful to keep in mind that sort of perspective. And I think, I think I'll turn it back around to you. Like, I think we're very grateful to you for cultivating this community and starting the Project for Awesome so many years ago. I think a lot of the vibes, as in the morning, the last 12 to 24 hours, as we were trying to get more and more signers for those Dear Colleague letters, to me felt very like Project for Awesome vibes. Like, wow, like let's
Oh,
keep
that's
going, like
great.
make one last minute call, like, this community is so great, and like exciting updates from results is like exciting. And I think
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
used to
yeah.
that sort of
And
thing.
this is something that we forget sometimes about activism work and advocacy work is that it's fun,
Yeah,
or it can be fun. Like, I don't find going to war with Danaher particularly fun, I have to say. Like that does not bring me a lot of pleasure, but the memes are great. Um, and like very funny and like very engaging and everything and like um and I do find the kind of like purely positive activism of making the case to our elected representatives that this should be a funding focus. And this is true in the United States. It's also true if you live in the UK or Canada. I mean, everybody's cutting back their foreign aid spending. So you don't have to be an American to be living in a country where foreign aid is being gutted. You can live in Germany, you can live in Australia, you can live in France. But but I think like that stuff is so fun. Like and the Project for Awesome is like that. It's an us that doesn't need a them, right? And it's there's no enemy except suffering. And like that's real that is really fun. Sometimes I think we forget that like this work can be really fun to do together. It's the last thing Paul Farmer ever said to me, actually. We were on a call for like Giving Tuesday, and he said, at the end of it, he said, like, isn't it fun? Isn't this fun that we get to do this and we get to be friends with each other and I get to meet such people from all over the world? And I was like, it is fun, Paul. I'm having a good time right now.
That's really sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is fun. That's what we decided we could teach partners in health at the Hill Day. They could teach us how to do advocacy and how our government works, and we could like make some bracelets and make it cute.
It totally worked though. Like you made it fun. You made it like the P for A. And that makes a big difference. And that makes people want to come back. Like if it's
Yeah,
dreary and miserable, it makes people not want to come back.
yeah,
And
exactly.
so at the end of that day, I was like, I want to come back even though this is a long day and my feet hurt.
Yeah, yeah. Where will I see my TB friends except at TB summer camp
TB summer camp, man. I love that idea. TB summer camp. Let's long may TB summer camp reign.
until it's everything was tuberculosis.
That's right. That's right. Then we can take on cholera or whatever.
I guess I'll back up now. I was kind of hoping Henry would get here before I asked this question, but what
We
do
can
you
ask him
think?
again if he gets here at some point. I feel bad for
Okay,
him. Like Henry has a bunch of challenges when it comes to getting the internet. He has Starlink now, but he still has like lots and lots of challenges. Like the power may be out. Like we don't know what the situation is. So, yeah, but I'm sure he's trying to get here.
okay, yeah, no worries. Um, what do you think that U.S. healthcare providers can learn from Sierra Leonean ones?
So much. I mean, I think the biggest thing is to remember, like the biggest thing is they have a very different structure there where they're much more dependent upon community health workers,
Yeah.
nurses and midwives, people in those roles than they are on physicians and nurse practitioners. So it's much more of a ground up system than a top down system. And I think having community health workers works really, really well. We need community health workers in the United States. I have people in my family who are like complicated cases of diabetes who would benefit so much from a community health worker. And also the US healthcare system would benefit from that community health worker because it would cost a lot less to treat their diabetes. The same is true for other chronic health conditions, right? And so we know that this can work and we know that it can work at scale because countries like Sierra Leone have showed us that. Um, I think that another thing that we can learn from the Sierra Leonean healthcare system is about the person and the patient. It's really hard not to see people as patients and like not to see people as another person you have to give another and in the US system especially like this is a real problem because like you get paid a lot of times by the consult or by the procedure. And so every person is another consult or another procedure, not necessarily a human being. It's hard to remember that. Like when I was a chaplain, I remember how hard that was. And I was only a chaplain for 6 months, but like at the end of that 6 months, it was much harder to like remember the human being in each of these human beings. And I was a chaplain, like I wasn't providing any other kind of care. Um, so I think that's the most important thing. And I think the Sierra Leonean healthcare system, at least at Koidu Government Hospital at KGH, does a better job of that than sometimes than the US healthcare system does. So those are the two things that I would cite. But I would be very interested to know what Henry would say to that. We might have to schedule a second Q&A where Henry isn't having a power outage or whatever.
Oh, I think we would be thrilled. Um,
Yeah.
we have like at least twice as many questions as how many I've asked you.
Great.
Uh, so we can just do it again.
Okay, sounds
Um,
good.
I guess, do you think do you think that in the do you think that Sierra Leone's healthcare system's better ability to see the person in the patient is mostly related to the community health workers, or it's just the culture, or like why do you think that is?
I think it's a lot related to the community health workers. I also think it's like I think it is. I think it's a cultural thing at KGH specifically. I actually don't think that it necessarily applies to the entire healthcare system, because a lot of times, I mean, it's especially when it comes to like TB care, care for chronic diseases like HIV. A lot of times, people are still hugely stigmatized, and that's a real barrier to care, barrier to entry to care, because like, who wants to go pick up your medication if it's going to be thrown at you from across the room? And people do experience that everywhere. There are TB and HIV patients, because those are two hugely stigmatized diseases. But I think at KGH, partly because of the PIH role, partly because of the way that the Ministry of Health has set things up there, it's different now, and it is a lot better. And you know. I think it's partly because traditional birth attendants and community health workers are welcome into those spaces, especially for maternal care. Like having a traditional birth attendant who sings at your bedside while you're giving birth and who helps you give birth and is someone you trust, who knows your stories and your songs and your traditions, like that matters.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you know whether anywhere in the States, I listened to yet another podcast. I want to say it was, is it Sydney McElroy who's the doctor who was talking
Yeah,
about how, and she was also running for office at some point, and she was
yeah,
talking about
yeah.
trying to implement, I think she works with HIV positive patients and wanted to try to implement community health care workers in West Virginia.
It's
Do you know
starting
if
to
that's the
happen.
case
It's
anywhere?
Yeah, it's mostly pilot programs. I know there are some in Alaska, in rural communities. I know there are some on in the Navajo Nation. I know there are some in pockets. It's it's complicated in the United States, partly because like the system is just so expensive. It's so expensive to interact with, and so if you're increasing the amount of care that someone's giving, um, it's a little harder to make the case that it's a cost-effective, I have to put those word in quotation marks, intervention. But but yeah, it is starting to happen, and I think that that's got to be part of our future together, because we have to keep the care in healthcare.
And you're totally right. It is cost effective. Like, even if you want to look at it purely by cost, like it's way cheaper to just give someone a nutritionist than to like treat their diabetic crisis when they end up in the hospital.
You're telling me.
Anyway, okay. What else did I want to ask you? Oh, okay. What, yeah, this is a good last question. What is the best case scenario for the impact of this book, and how can we help it get there?
Well, I mean, look, this has already exceeded my wildest dreams, right? Like, it's been on the New York Times bestseller list longer than the Anthropocene Reviewed was, which I would have bet a lot of money against. It's a book about tuberculosis. I feel like I keep having to say to people, it's a book about tuberculosis. Like, I know you think it's going to secretly be something else, but it really is a book about tuberculosis. And so I felt like that was a huge uphill battle to try to get people excited about a book about TB. Like, yes, I have like brand recognition or whatever and name recognition, but I have name recognition primarily as a YA novelist and then secondarily as a podcaster, not as a TB expert. And so the book has already exceeded my wildest expectations. And I think that, Nerdfighteria is a huge part of the reason why. Like, they've been evangelists for this book. Like, they're sharing it with their parents and their family members and their friends, and like forcing it down people's throats in some cases. And like, that's been amazing. So, that's the most important thing, because I do think that like, look, in 2019, when I had no idea that tuberculosis was the world's deadliest infectious disease, I think no one else did either in the rich world. Like, people weren't talking about it. Now people are talking more about TB. It's a better time for TB in terms of I mean, it's a bad time for TB because of gestures broadly, but it's a better time for TB in the sense that we are really developing exciting new tools. You know, like um, let me just say this in the most in a roundabout way. If Danaher were to ever say, for instance, that they're getting out of this business because they can't handle the heat from civil society or whatever, they would be lying, right? Like we know they're lying because the truth is they're getting out. If they were to get out of the business, they would be getting out of the business because they know that there are cheaper tests coming, cheaper, better tests. And so it's an exciting moment in that way that like cheaper, better tests are coming. People who are easier to work with on cheaper, better tests are coming. Better medications may be coming. We have a phase 3 vaccine trial for the first time in 100 years. You
Vaccine would
know, I
be
mean,
so huge.
it could be so huge. Now, like, it has to work. And I worry that if it doesn't work, instead of taking the right lesson from that, which is okay, we need to double down on finding better vaccine candidates, people might take the wrong lesson from that, which is that this is not a vaccine preventable disease. Um, but it has to work. I've never felt so strongly about something before in my life. I want it to work even more than I want AFC Wimbledon to win on Saturday. It has to work. So it's a really exciting moment, and so I hope that the book can be part of that increase in momentum. You know it'll be a very small part of that increase in momentum, but if it can be part of that like increase of attention, increase in momentum, then like I think we can overcome this horrible moment and look back on this. Look, things are going to get worse. Like there's no getting around that, and like that's part of what makes the work that y'all are doing so important right now is that things are going to get worse and like it's kind of about figuring out how much worse they're going to get. But every person they don't get worse for is a life saved right now. And that's why I think these Dear Colleague letters are so important. That's why I think like calling our Congress people about U.S. aid was so important. That's why I think like just continuing the fight with governments is so important because um, they just decide so much of what gets funded and like who lives and who dies, unfortunately. And so I just want to be part of that. And I don't want I don't think the book is going to be a central character in that story, but I want to be part of that story as I know and I want TB fighters to be part of that story. I want all of us to be part of that story together. And so that's really what I want. I want the book to be an encouragement to the people who are fighting this disease, and I want the book to bring more people into that work.
I think it's definitely done that. I have maybe I'm gonna grab my book because it has.
Has anyone else been trying to figure out what room in Michelle's house we're in, just based on the blurred background? I think that's a fridge in the back, but I'm not positive.
Yes, that is the fridge and an open cupboard. But I feel like this is a good sign that you've inspired a lot of
Oh, look at
people.
that. Oh,
Um,
yay.
anyway, thank
Yeah,
you
that it
so
can be something
much.
that brings people together and gives people hope. Like that's the ultimate job of a book, you know? Like that's the job of a book like this. And so it's very encouraging to me to see that and to know that that's it's something that's happened for your copy.
Yeah, and for a lot of people's copies, and even one that made it into the news somewhere.
That's
Um,
so cool.
but I think that's a good last question. So thank you so much for giving us your time and agreeing to
Yeah, I'm
do
so
this.
sorry Henry wasn't able to join us, but let's see if we can schedule a time for Henry to join us, and I'll try to join too. I mean, my life is a little hectic at the moment. I'm still on the road for TB. I'm going to Geneva next week, but let's see if we can continue.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Did you want to have any last closing thoughts, or do you want to plug anything?
I don't want to plug anything. I just want to say how grateful I am to the TB fighters. Like, this is there's so much in this community that I'm proud of, and that this is I didn't realize when we started making YouTube videos that this was going to be my life's work. And I feel so lucky to have this work with y'all. I feel so lucky to be in it with you guys. And I'm just really, really grateful.
Thanks. We're also really grateful to you for pointing us pointing us at this work. Um,
Awesome. Well, thank you, Michelle. Thank you to all the TB fighters out there. Thanks for reading my book. I appreciate it. TB readers. This isn't the TB fighters. This is the TB readers.
Yes, now we're TV readers.
Love it.
So to find out, thanks everyone for being here and attending the Q&A. To find out more about TB Fighters, you can go to tbfighters.org or you can follow us on social media. We are at TB Fighters everywhere. And we also have, as John just pointed out, the TB Readers hashtag. We're reading Phantom Plague next.
Thanks, everybody.